Unfiltered Survival by Tye Barter. Chapter 1, The Best Life. Vivi repositioned her Gucci sunglasses, maneuvering her phone for the ideal capture. The private jet's leather upholstery supported her designer-adorned figure as she initiated recording. "Hello, darlings," she displayed a polished, rehearsed grin, angling the camera precisely to include the Luxe jet emblem shimmering behind her. "Greeting you from 40,000 feet up because yours truly doesn't tolerate standard class." She tossed her honey blonde hair extensions across one shoulder, allowing the cabin's circular lighting to accentuate her luminous highlighter perfectly. "Massive thanks to LuxJet for transforming my travel fantasies into reality. Flying private is simply so much more, well, you understand. How might I phrase it? Genuine, that's precisely it." She grasped the champagne glass, hesitated to let viewers observe the golden effervescence, then took a deliberate taste. The aircraft appeared to encounter a minor disturbance, causing a wave through the beverage. Vivi scarcely reacted. Rather, she flashed a knowing look at the camera. "Turbulence? Never met her." She chuckled. "Pro tip, always bring the proper lighting," she explained, tweaking the ring light attached to her seat. "We don't merely take journeys, we generate content." She shifted the camera towards her white midriff top and coordinating silk trousers. "Always dress for the gram, never for the journey." She straightened the crease-resistant material, ensuring her audience noticed the designer insignia visible at her waistline. The aircraft trembled once more. Vivi disregarded it, concentrating instead on entering swift modifications onto her display, adding soundtrack and text, preparing her footage to spread widely. Her flying content, always included a sumptuous excursion to some distant hideaway, was tremendously successful and lucrative, particularly when she incorporated several product endorsements. Pure profit, darling. Subscribers devoured the opulent lifestyle and promoters adored the aspirational perspective. The elegance and grandeur consistently attracted buyers, or at minimum had always captivated her audience. Some bought while some just wanted to be entertained. Vivi concluded and published her video. With a victorious expression, she accessed her performance metrics for her routine examination. This represented the crucial aspect. When circumstances were favorable and people were viewing, those days were enjoyable. When circumstances were unfavorable, well, that had an opposite result. Then her mobile vibrated. It was Derek. "Damn," she exclaimed, the display illuminated with the contact's name, A-hole. Vivi swiped to respond, artificially beaming. "Derek, impeccable timing. I've just completed the most incredible material for LuxJet." "Yeah, that's nice, but spare me the nonsense, Vivi." His words cut through her studied enthusiasm. Sunkissed Beauty canceled their agreement. Something regarding interaction statistics falling below expectations. "You understand how much revenue that generates monthly, correct?" Champagne churning now in her abdomen. "What? No, they mustn't." "It gets worse." A keyboard rattled in the background. 3 additional brands are considering their collaboration approach. Your numbers are plummeting." Vivi's hands shook as she examined her engagement data. Crimson indicators. Down, down, way down. Her pulse accelerated. "This isn't happening." She scrolled more rapidly, as though refreshing the display would alter reality. "I just got to 13 million followers." "Indeed?" "Dud followers don't participate, darling. This latest algorithm's devastating you." Her breathing faltered. No engagement signified no brand contracts. No contracts meant no income. No income meant no LA residence. No designer promotional packages. No additional private flights to exclusive retreats to offer her esteemed, influential perspective. She was already financially overwhelmed. She was drowning in debt and obligations and needed something to get her out of the red. "I'm already on it," she declared. Derek hesitated. "Oh yeah, on what?" This was something Vivi was considering, somewhat. She truly was covertly developing a new miniseries concept. It would draw inspiration from off-grid, survivalist, homesteading, preppers blended with fashion. It would appear as a genuine survival or emergency, but completely staged from her end. She had several locations identified. She would require an accessible remote location or semblance of remote location where she could record her episodes. Each evening, she could indulge at a pleasant motel nearby. She could showcase numerous fashions, services, excursions, and gadgets. She was readying sell any products for anyone for nearly anything to initiate this project. She had several brands identified, but she wasn't. She would need to embellish slightly to create authenticity, but honestly, she'd built a career doing precisely that. I'm organizing a survival collab. Silence. A lengthy pause from Derek. A what? Well, like those off-grid influencers, or maroon survivalist prepper channel creators, or off-grid homesteading, but incorporate fashion and market some gadgets and products that complement the survival theme. I did my research, Derek, she lied. You gotta trust me on this, raw, authentic content, she continued. The algorithm loves that stuff. This is what will attract viewers. This is hot right now. She paused, then added, we're anticipating the trend, remember? So we'll dominate the movement and we stay on top of the curve, right? Since when do you produce survival content? Asked Derek. Homesteading and preppers. What on earth, Vivi? He couldn't restrain himself and spit out a laugh. Vivi clutched the phone tighter. Trust me, Derek. This is precisely what my brand requires. A new, fresh direction. Something novel. It's a brilliant concept. I simply need additional time to develop it thoroughly. I've been researching various methods of preparation and surviving when disoriented. This wasn't untrue, not exactly. She had downloaded several survival manuals onto her mobile, although she hadn't looked at them yet. If you're deceiving me, I'm not, Vivi's ears pounded. I merely need a few days to finalize the specifics. Derek's exhale crackled through the speaker. Very well, 2 days, that's 48 hours. Present me with a concept proposal and we'll review it. His tone softened. Another matter we must discuss, and you know I hate talking finances, but I must know when I will get a payment. You promised me, and you realize He faltered slightly. I understand, Derek. I'm working on getting the funds now. She deceived him again. I simply need to convert some assets, and apparently some of this isn't available for me until next week. A broken, robotic voice from Derek followed by that typical tone. The call was dropped. Vivi looked at her phone, her image reflected in the darkened screen. No reception, her phone was near dead. She plugged it into her Anchor power bank she retrieved from her Louis Vuitton custom handbag. The jet hummed around her, abruptly seeming less luxurious and more confining. She forced a deep breath. 48 hours. She merely required one concept substantial enough to become viral. If she could come up with the plan, Derek would find the funds. He always did. Chapter 2. Storm Mode. Vivi's champagne sloshed over the crystal rim, speckling her white silk pants. She barely noticed, steadying her phone as she switched to selfie mode. Turbulence check, besties. She grinned, angling herself to hide the growing storm outside. We're just out here living that luxury travel life. She swiped on another layer of gloss and puckered her lips. Outside the window, storm clouds thickened, swallowing the last golden hour light. The plane lurched again, a harder jolt. Vivi's stomach dipped, but she held her pose. Mother Nature's giving drama today, she joked, flipping her hair. Guess she didn't get the memo about my hair routine. She flipped the camera toward the window, zooming in on the swirling purple clouds. A faint flicker of lightning. Ooh, aesthetic, she smirked. Somebody grabs me a moody playlist. We're about to enter our dark and stormy era. The intercom crackled. This is your captain speaking. We're experiencing unexpected. A burst of static swallowed the rest. The plane dropped. Not a little bump, not a fun, flirty, ooh, we hit a pothole in the sky drop. A stomach-wrenching, full-blown plummet. The plane dropped 40 feet straight down. Vivi screamed, clutching the armrest as her phone slipped from her grip. The champagne flute crashed to the floor. She wrapped the strap of her Louis Vuitton bag around her fist and clutched the bag tight to her chest. In doing so, her designer bag spilled open, lipsticks and compacts tumbling onto the carpet. Okay, that was a bit, she started to complain out loud. The jet shuddered violently. The oxygen masks dropped. Vivi froze. A real, horrible silence filled the cabin. The only sound was the wind howling outside. She blinked at the masks, mind scrambling to process. This wasn't content anymore. The plane tilted hard right, her head slamming into the window. The glass cracked. Vivi was stunned. A loud pop, then a roar. Pressure was sucked out of the aircraft. Wind screamed through the cabin as something ripped open. Vivi gasped, struggling to breathe. Loose items became projectiles. A champagne glass, Derek's laptop, her carry-on bag. She felt for her phone, fingering around her feet as she kept her eyes shut and her bag pinched into her core. The plane tilted forward until it dipped into a full nosedive. Her lungs burned as she checked the seatbelt, her breath coming in shallow, panicked gasps. The mask, Vivi, the mask, she thought. She grabbed the dangling mask and got it on. Tucked back into herself, eyes closed, adrenaline taking over. A sickening screech of metal. The window beside her ripped open. Cold, violent air rushed in. The plane seemed to rip apart like an old shirt. She opened her eyes. Vivi saw the ocean below, a dark blue mass of ocean dotted with white caps. The ocean closed in. She closed her eyes again. She clutched into herself, and she tried to pretend this wasn't happening. Then, impact, darkness. Chapter 3, #help. Vivi woke up to the sound of waves crashing. Her body ached everywhere. Her head throbbed, her ribs screamed, her throat burned. The sand beneath her was hot and damp, tiny grains sticking to her wet skin. Her brain felt scrambled. Where dash dash? The Lux jet, the storm, the crash. Her eyes snapped open. Bright, blinding sunlight stabbed through her vision. She gasped, trying to sit up, but every muscle protested. Her silk outfit was ruined, soaked, torn, crusted with salt. Her bare feet stung from tiny scrapes and blisters. She was on a beach, not a Bali beach, not a Maldives beach, not a curated for content beach, just sand, water, and nothing else. The wind carried the distant screech of seagulls, the scent of salt and seaweed. Vivi turned her aching head, squinting against the sun. Scattered debris littered the shore. Twisted metal, luggage, broken pieces of the Lux jet. A champagne bottle bobbed in the shallows, its label peeling away. She swallowed, but her throat was so dry it felt like swallowing gravel. Her stomach churned. Where was her phone? Panic jolted her upright. She ignored the pain, digging through wet sand, her breath coming faster. No. There. Half buried near a wet Louis Vuitton bag, the screen caked with sand but intact. Her hands shook as she swiped. The screen flickered to life. She almost sobbed with relief. 5% battery, 1 bar of service. Not great, but enough. Maybe. Her thumb hovered over the camera icon. Her followers needed to see this. She flipped to selfie mode. Her own face stared back at her. Mascara streaked, hair matted with sand and salt. A cut on her forehead oozing drying blood down her temple. For the first time, she didn't look anything like her profile picture. Still, content was content. She hit record. Hey besties, she croaked, voice raw, unrecognizable. So, update. I think my plane crashed. A pause. Her hand shook. I'm on an island, I think? She turned the camera, panning across the wreckage-strewn beach. She forced a weak smile. Swipe up for my ultimate survival must-haves. She let out a shaky laugh, but it sounded wrong. Her brain felt foggy. She needed water, food, shelter. But first, she hit upload. Her screen glitched, buffering, then posted. Notifications flooded in immediately. Her pulse raced as she scrolled through the comments. Her stomach twisted. She typed, shaky hands blurring the letters. This is real. Plane crashed. Need help. Sent. The replies came instantly. Vivi's vision blurred. This wasn't happening. Her battery dropped to 3%. The signal bar disappeared. No. She jabbed the screen like it was a malfunctioning elevator button. Nothing. Her breathing hitched. 13 million followers, and not one of them believed her. She tried one last desperate message. I'm actually dying. Her phone vibrated. A DM popped up. From Lux Wellness, Skincare. Hey Queen, love the raw, unfiltered content. Would love to send you our new SPF. Guaranteed to protect even in extreme situations. LMK. Her jaw clenched so hard her teeth ached. Another DM from Earthbound Gear. Hi, Vivi. Your survival content is FIRE. Let's collab. Our new emergency kits are so on brand for this vibe. Her fingers curled into the sand. Another. From Clean Eats Meal Prep. LMK if you want a PR drop of our plant-based protein bars. Perfect for a crash diet. A laugh bubbled up her throat. Not a real laugh. A cracked, broken, holy shit, I'm actually gonna die laugh. Her phone flashed one last time. 1% battery. She lifted it weakly, tapping into settings. Emergency contacts. She should have paid attention to the safety demo. Should have saved emergency numbers instead of planning captions. Her fingers hovered over her mom's name. She never called. Always texted, always DM'd. Would her own mother even pick up? The screen flickered. Then, black. The battery was dead. And for the first time in many years, so was out of reach her audience. Her phone slipped from her fingers, falling lifeless into the sand. No service, no battery, no followers. No one coming. Vivi squeezed her eyes shut, the waves crashing louder than ever. The tide pushed more wreckage onto shore. A champagne bottle rolled past. The sun blazed overhead, indifferent. And Vivi Cruz had never been this alone. Chapter 4. The Algorithm of Survival. Vivi sat in the sand, staring at her dead phone. No notifications, no rescue. Just the sun, pounding against her raw skin, the waves, dragging more broken LuxJet debris onto shore. She swallowed, in protest of her sandpaper throat. The last time she'd had water was on the plane, hours ago. Her tongue felt thick, her lips cracked. She dug in her bag and found and applied a layer of lip gloss. The air smelled like salt and seaweed, thick and humid. Her body ached from the crash, muscles stiff from being tossed around like luggage. Her eyes burned as she stared at the open ocean, scanning for boats, planes, anything. But the horizon stretched, empty and endless. "Okay, this is fine," she whispered, even though it wasn't. "You got this. You're an independent queen, a problem solver, a dash." Her stomach cramped, violently. She doubled over, pressing her fingers into her hollow abdomen. She was hungry. But worse, she was thirsty. She forced herself to stand, dizzy. Her knees wobbled. First things first, water. She turned inland. There appeared a jungle. Dense green, thick with palm trees and vines. It didn't look curated or aesthetic, just wild, overgrown and unpredictable. Her legs shook as she forced herself to move. She couldn't just sit here waiting for rescue. The algorithm favored engagement. She had to engage. She reached for her phone out of instinct, to document this. Then she remembered it was dead. Right. No phone, no audience. She was alone. She forced a breath. "You're fine. You're an adventurer now, a survival queen. Let's go." The air shifted the moment she stepped off the sand and into the jungle. The cool shade was a relief at first, but the ground felt different here. Damp, uneven, full of hidden roots. Every step sank slightly, her bare feet pressing into the muddy earth. The sounds were different too. On the beach, it had been wind and waves. Here it was, alive with insects or animals, or Vivi had no idea. Leaves rustling, unseen things moving, birds screeching, a constant low drone of insects. Vivi clutched her arms, suddenly aware of how small she was. She pushed forward, stepping around fallen branches and clusters of ferns. She had no idea what she was looking for. Just something. A coconut. A stream. A miracle. Her throat screamed for water. And then something moved. A rustle in the underbrush. She froze. She heard a low grunt followed by heavy breathing. A shape shifted in the shadows. Large. Too large. Her heartbeat pounded inside her head. She took a slow step back. And then it charged. A blur of dark fur and tusks. A wild boar. Vivi screamed. She tripped backward, stumbling into the dirt as the boar crashed through the foliage. It skidded to a stop, sniffing the air, its small black eyes locking onto her. Vivi's breath came fast, panicked. She scrambled backward, hands digging into the mud. The boar snorted, stomping its thick legs, nostrils flaring, waiting, watching. Oh my God, oh my God. Vivi's mind raced. What was she supposed to do? Was this like bear encounters where you stayed still? Or sharks where you punched them in the nose? Or was this like bad dates where you just blocked and ran? The boar sniffed again. took a step closer. Vivi grabbed the first thing she could find, a branch, damp and half-rotted. She threw it. It landed 3 feet away. The boar didn't move. Vivi's chest heaved. She screamed at the boar with all the energy she had left inside her. And then, just as suddenly as it appeared, it lost interest. The boar snorted one last time, then turned and trotted off into the undergrowth. Vivi collapsed back onto the dirt, gasping. Her lungs ached from holding her breath. Her body shook. For a long moment, she just lay there, staring up at the canopy of trees, trying to remember how to breathe. By the time Vivi made it back to the beach, the sun was setting. Her hands were scraped, her legs trembling, but she was alive, and she had one coconut. It had taken an hour of trial, error, and breakdowns before she figured out how to crack it open on a rock. Her fingernails were destroyed. Her silk outfit was beyond saving. But the first sip of coconut water tasted like salvation. She gulped it down, milky juice dribbling down her chin. It was the first thing that had gone right today, and it gave her an idea. She decided to rummage around the debris on the beach. In her search, she found her bag. Her beautiful Louis Vuitton, not so beautiful looking as it once was. She grabbed it, dumped the contents of her designer bag onto the sand. Makeup, bronzer, lip gloss, all of it waterlogged. Some juicy fruit and candies. Her power bank was there. Oh my. She gasped. Now she could get her phone back up. It was wet, but it looked okay. She set it up on high ground to dry out a little before plugging in. Her hands shook as she grabbed her metal selfie stick. It was in the bag too, along with an expensive manicure kit and the best thing of all right now. She found 2 Vitalux Power Energy bars. Hell yes, she screamed. She immediately tore one open and ate it. She stopped herself from opening the second one, only for a few minutes, then she ate that one too. She remembered a survival tip from a downloaded article on her phone, one of those research items for her mock survival episode, things she'd saved between makeup tutorials and outfit inspiration posts. The article had detailed various methods for starting fires in the wilderness, complete with step-by-step photos that she'd barely glanced at before. Thinking she'd never really need them to work, both phone and battery appeared to be dry, so she plugged her phone in. The power bank was showing 60%. Vivi's hands trembled as her phone screen flickered to life. 3%. The power bank had barely charged it, but it was enough. She scrolled through her downloads frantically, fingers leaving smudges on the screen. There, between a green smoothie recipe and a beach workout routine, the survival guide. The sun hung low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the beach. She had maybe an hour of daylight left. Her manicure kit lay scattered in the sand. The tiny magnifying glass caught the light, sending a bright spot dancing across her leg. She grabbed it, remembering the article's instructions. "Focus the light," she muttered, angling the glass above a pile of dried coconut husks she'd gathered. The spot of light wavered, then steadied. "Come on, come on." Nothing happened. She adjusted the angle, remembering the diagram on her phone. The bright dot shrank to a precise point. Smoke curled up from the fibers. Her heart leaped. The phone screen went black. "No, no, no!" She jabbed the power button. Dead. But she'd seen enough. She kept the magnifying glass steady, watching as the smoke thickened. A tiny ember appeared, glowing orange against the brown husk. Vivi lowered her face close to the ember and blew gently, just as the guide had shown. The ember grew brighter. She added more coconut fiber, then small twigs. A flame sprouted, no bigger than her fingernail. She fed it carefully, sheltering it from the ocean breeze with her body until it caught properly. "Oh my God," she whispered, watching the fire grow. "I actually did it." With night approaching, Vivi quickly scurried around the beach collecting driftwood and deadwood, her feet leaving shallow prints in the damp sand. She kept well clear of entering the jungle, where shadows had already begun to lengthen between the trees. Within a few minutes, she had a proper bonfire raging, its flames leaping towards the darkening sky. The warmth against her skin and the crackling sound of burning wood filled her with unexpected comfort. She had hope. Too bad I didn't get this on video, she thought, and then almost laughed at how instinctively that notion had come to her, even now. She's made something that isn't for content, but man, that would have made great stuff. Viral stuff. The battle with the boar, Derek would crap his pants at this shit. She spent the night feeding the fire and staring at the flames. The morning sun beat down as Vivi stared at the fat black beetle crawling across a fallen log. Her stomach churned, both from hunger and revulsion. She'd seen people eat insects on survival shows, always with dramatic music and close-up shots of their grimacing faces. But this wasn't for views or engagement. This was survival. She snatched the beetle before she could talk herself out of it. Its legs wiggled against her fingers as she squeezed her eyes shut. "Just pretend it's caviar," she whispered. "Really crunchy, weird caviar." She popped it in her mouth. The beetle's shell cracked between her teeth, releasing a burst of bitter fluid. Her throat convulsed. She gagged, doubling over as her body fought to reject what she'd just eaten. But she forced herself to swallow. Tears streamed down her face. This was rock bottom. No filters could make this look glamorous. No caption could spin this into aspirational content. A distant rumble cut through her thoughts. Her head snapped up. The sound grew louder, mechanical, rhythmic. An airplane. She bolted toward the beach, bare feet pounding against dirt, then sand. The plane's silhouette emerged from behind the clouds, a small rescue aircraft, flying low over the ocean. "Here!" Vivi screamed, waving her arms above her head. "I'm here!" She sprinted along the shoreline, legs burning, lungs heaving. The plane continued its trajectory, neither slowing nor turning. "Please!" Her voice cracked. "Please see me!" But the aircraft grew smaller against the horizon until it disappeared completely, leaving only the sound of waves and her ragged breathing. Vivi's arms dropped to her sides. She stood there, chest heaving as reality sank in. No one was coming to save her. No manager to fix this mess. No followers to validate her existence. No mother to make everything okay. If she wanted to survive, she'd have to do it herself. Chapter 5. Sponsored by Starvation. The waves lapped at Vivi's feet as she stared at the horizon where the rescue plane had vanished. Her designer dress, now torn and salt-stained, fluttered in the breeze. She turned back to her makeshift camp, scanning the wreckage that had washed up on shore. A glint of metal caught her eye. Half buried in the sand lay her makeup case, its silver surface dented but intact. She dug it out and popped the clasp. Inside, her collection of high-end cosmetics had survived relatively unscathed. The mirror wasn't cracked. A small mercy. Vivi caught her reflection and barely recognized herself. Tangled hair, sunburned skin, dirt smudged across her cheeks. She grabbed her foundation compact and opened it, but stopped herself. "What am I doing?" She tossed the compact back in the case. "Can't eat makeup." She dumped the contents onto the sand. Lipsticks, brushes, eyeshadow palettes, tools of her former life scattered around her. But among the luxury items, she found useful treasures. Tweezers, small scissors, safety pins, hair ties, and a metal nail file. Her hands shook as she sorted the items into piles. The nail file could scrape coconuts, tweezers for splinters, safety pins to repair clothing. Earlier, she found a torn piece of the plane's emergency manual fluttered past. Vivi had stuffed it in the bag as well. The illustrations showed how to signal rescue aircraft. 3 fires in a triangle pattern. She looked at her single campfire, then at the jungle's edge where more wood waited. The makeup case's mirror could help signal planes too. Her survival tools were growing. "Okay, universe," she muttered, gathering driftwood into her arms. "You want me to rebrand? Fine. Watch me pivot from luxury lifestyle to wilderness survival." The irony wasn't lost on her. After years of carefully curating a perfect image, she was about to get real. Very real. Vivi pulled her phone from the Louis Vuitton bag where she'd stashed it. The power bank had managed to give it a small charge, enough for another attempt. The screen flickered to life, displaying a weak signal bar. Her hands trembled as she opened her camera roll. Hundreds of perfectly filtered photos stared back at her. Fashion shoots in Paris, brunches in Beverly Hills, yacht parties in Miami. A highlight reel of a life that felt like it belonged to someone else now. She scrolled to her most recent video, the one she'd filmed right before the crash. Her own voice rang out, champagne glass in hand. "Turbulence check. Don't worry, babes. Your girl's living her best life even when..." The footage cut off in a blast of static and screaming. Vivi closed the video, her throat tight. The battery indicator blinked red, 2% remaining. She opened her contacts and scrolled to Mom. Her thumb hovered over the call button. What would she even say? Sorry for ghosting you these past months? Sorry I was too embarrassed to visit because your modest apartment didn't fit my aesthetic? The phone screen dimmed to conserve power. A photo of her mother appeared as the contact image. Maria Cruz in her nurse's scrubs, silver streaks in her dark hair, that warm smile that had gotten Vivi through countless rough patches. I should have called more, Vivi's voice cracked. I should have. The screen went black. She pressed the power button repeatedly, but nothing happened. The phone was dead again. The power bank's red light turned green, and Vivi's phone screen flickered to life. She propped it against her Louis Vuitton cooler, angling it to catch her face in the frame. The mid-morning sun cast harsh shadows across her features. No ring light to soften them now. She smoothed back her tangled hair and pressed record. Hi, babes. Her voice came out hoarse. So, this isn't a prank or a collab. My private jet crashed like 3 days ago, I think. She lifted her arms, revealing the cuts and bruises. I've been drinking coconut water and eating bugs to survive. A crab scuttled past her feet. She didn't flinch this time. She snatched him up and showed him to the camera before stuffing him in the bag for later. The pilot! Her voice cracked. She cleared her throat. I'm alone here. My location tracking is broken, and the rescue planes can't see me. If anyone knows where LuxJet Flight 278 went down, please contact the authorities. I can't make a phone call, not enough signal or something. I can only upload through SnapTalk app into my YouTube platform. Can someone help, please? She touched the scratches on her face. And Mom, if you're watching this... Tears welled in her eyes. I'm sorry I missed dinner last month, and the month before that. I'm sorry for a lot of things. The phone's low battery warning popped up. Vivi wiped her eyes and straightened her shoulders. I don't know how much battery I have left, but I promise I'm not giving up. Your girl's tougher than she looks. She managed a weak smile. And when I get back, we're doing a proper survival collection. Bug-proof mascara, anyone? She reached forward and ended the recording. The upload button spun for what felt like hours before the signal bar appeared. Posted. Within seconds, the comments rolled in. OMG, this looks so real. Slay Queen, giving us lost vibes. What foundation stays on through a plane crash? Drop the routine, sis. Vivi stared at the screen, her hands shaking. They still didn't believe her. The battery indicator blinked, 15% remaining. She had to make it count. Vivi's watched a seagull crack open something spiky against the rocks, its beak working with practiced precision. The bird pecked methodically at the orange flesh inside, savoring each morsel, and her mouth watered despite herself. Her stomach growled. She swallowed hard, trying to ignore the gnawing emptiness in her gut. 3 days of nothing but 2 crappy protein bars. She wishes now she would have rationed a bit more. Some bugs and a crab, which was horrible. The sight of the bird's feast was almost unbearable to watch, yet she couldn't tear her eyes away. There were coconuts, but any she found on the ground and broke open weren't viable. Most of them were rotten or hollowed out. She would have to learn how to get them out of the trees. She plugged her phone into her power bank. It was not working properly, showing 10%. How could I have used that much, she thought? She woke in the afternoon, completely oblivious to where she was, at least right away. Vivi checked her phone. She had set it up the night before and plugged it into her phone. The charger was sitting in the direct sunlight. Her phone was 45% battery. The battery bank, dead. Movie time, Vivi says to herself out loud, taking her phone and forcing her stiff muscles to lift her up. She set out across the beach, her designer silks dropping and dirty. She found several tide pools teeming with the same spiky creatures, sea urchins. They clustered in the shallow water, their black needles swaying with each wave. She scooped a few up and ran back up on the beach to investigate. This is fine, totally fine. People eat these at sushi restaurants all the time. She picked up a rock, she looked at her broken, jagged nails and laughed. She heaved the rock at the spiked egg. The urchin cracked open with a wet, sloppy crunch. Inside, segments of orange flesh glistened. Vivi winced, almost quit right then. I got this, babes, she told the phone. Her hands shook as she scooped out a piece, the orange flesh clinging to her trembling fingers. The texture was slimy, alien, like nothing she'd ever eaten at her favorite Beverly Hills sushi spots. Vivi looked at the camera. She squeezed her eyes shut and popped it in her mouth, fighting the urge to gag as the briny taste hit her tongue. Oh God, she gagged but forced herself to chew. It tasted like iodine and salt, nothing like the delicate sushi she recalled. Her stomach lurched. She stumbled to her feet but didn't make it far. The contents of her stomach splashed across her tattered silk pants, the limited edition one she'd gotten at Fashion Week. Her phone was in her hand before she realized what she was doing. The camera shook as she recorded. "So, besties?" She wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. "Don't believe those aesthetic island survival posts. This is the real deal." She gestured to the mess on her clothes. Hashtag puking in Prada. At least it's still on brand. Pink on pink. Her stomach heaved again. The phone tumbled into the sand as she doubled over, retching. When she finally caught her breath, she picked up the phone and hit upload. "And that's why you always pack Dramamine in your emergency kit. If I had such a kit." She forced a weak smile. Stay tuned for more survival tips from your favorite castaway. The video uploaded just as another wave of nausea hit. This time, she heaved up nothing but a little bile. Vivi's phone buzzed with notifications. Her trembling fingers swiped through a flood of DMS from fashion brands. "Hey, Queen! Love the authentic content. We'd love to send you our new athleisure line. Triple your usual rate if you get sick in it. Raw and real." Another message popped up. "Vivi, our emergency survival kit would look amazing in your next video. Especially if you're, not feeling well. Name your price. Maybe we can have a kit dropped off to your island." She scrolled through dozens more, each one more sickening than the last. They wanted her misery, packaged and branded. Her stomach churned again, but this time it wasn't from the sea urchin. "You've got to be kidding me." She hurled the phone into the sand. The cracked screen caught the sunlight, winking at her like a cruel joke. The Louis Vuitton bag lay nearby, its scratched surface a reminder of how far she'd fallen. 3 days ago, she'd have jumped at these offers. Now, watching the waves crash against the shore, the thought of monetizing her suffering made her skin crawl. She picked up her phone again, hands shaking with anger rather than weakness. The camera rolled. "Listen up." Her voice cracked. "To all the brands in my DMs right now, I'm not your circus monkey. I'm actually dying here." She panned across the beach, showing the wreckage. "The pilot's dead. I haven't had real food in days. And you want me to, what? Puke on command for your latest collection?" Her finger hovered over the delete button. This wasn't the polished, brand-friendly content her followers expected. But something stopped her. For the first time since the crash, her hands steadied. She hit upload. Vivi stared at her phone as the notifications poured in. Her last raw, angry video had racked up more views than anything she'd posted in months. The comments ranged from concerned to cruel, but the engagement numbers didn't lie. She picked up another sea urchin, turning it over in her hands. Her stomach clenched at the memory of her earlier attempt, but the DMs kept coming. "OMG, Queen, that was so real. Can you do it again, but with our new waterproof mascara?" "Love the authentic content. Our survival gear would look amazing in your next breakdown." The numbers flashed through her head. Triple her usual rate meant enough to cover 3 months of rent. Maybe even pay off some of her credit cards. All she had to do was crack open another urchin, force it down, and let the cameras roll. Her hands shook as she positioned the spiky shell. The mere thought of its slimy interior made bile rise in her throat. She grabbed her phone, propped it against the Louis Vuitton cooler, and hit record. "Hey besties, round 2 of Island Survival coming at you." The words caught in her throat as she gagged. She hadn't even touched the urchin yet. Her body physically rejected the idea of performing her suffering for likes. "I can't." She dropped the urchin, letting it roll back into the tide pool. "I actually can't." The realization hit her harder than the waves that had washed her ashore. She'd spent years manufacturing moments for the camera, but this was different. This wasn't about finding the perfect angle or lighting. This was survival, raw and real. Her stomach growled, reminding her that she still needed to find food. But not like this. Not as a performance. She picked up her phone and deleted the draft. The notifications continued to buzz, each one promising money, exposure, opportunities. She switched it to silent and tucked it into the bag. Chapter 6. Ghosts in the Feed? Vivi sprawled on the sand, her head spinning as the sun set in a blaze of orange. The empty urchin shells lay scattered around her like tiny broken crowns, their spines casting long shadows across the beach. Her stomach churned from eating too many of the sea creatures. But at least the gnawing hunger had subsided. They were much easier to eat once she discovered how to cook them. She just stuck them whole into the hot coals. A chime rang from her phone. Just as expected, a new response materialized beneath her most recent upload. Beach Babe, 92. You look like crap. She blinked hard, but the comment remained. More followed. A trendy Tina. OMG, what happened to her face? A luxury life. 365. This is so fake. Where's her glam team? Craw Beauty Queen. Unfollow. Can't believe I used to stan her. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she scrolled through the phantom comments. The words blurred and shifted, multiplying across her screen like insects. It's not real, she mumbled, her tongue feeling thick. Her stomach churned. Not real comments. Miami girl, is this what happens when you eat raw seafood? Blah. The phone slipped from her grasp. She rolled onto her side, retching into the sand. The world tilted sideways, palm trees spinning against the darkening sky. Influencer T. Breaking. Vivi Cruz's island survival story exposed as PR stunt gone wrong. Stop. She pressed her hands against her eyes, but the comments floated behind her eyelids, glowing like neon signs. Beach Babe 92. Maybe she should have stuck to posting sponsored content. A trendy Tina. This is what happens when you try to fake authentic. Her fingers clawed at the sand as another wave of nausea hit. The notifications kept pinging, each one hammering against her skull like a tiny bell. Luxury Life, 365, unsubscribe, can't watch someone actually fake a struggle. Beauty Queen, remember when she was pretty? TBT. The late-day sun cast long shadows across the beach as Vivi stumbled through the wreckage. Her bare feet sank into wet sand with each step. The tide had pulled back, revealing new pieces of the crash. That's when she saw him. The pilot's body lay half buried in sand and debris, his uniform dark with seawater. His face looked peaceful, as if he'd fallen asleep on the beach. One arm stretched out toward the water, fingers curled around nothing. Vivi's knees buckled. She dropped beside him, sand soaking through her torn designer leggings. I'm sorry. Her voice cracked. I never even asked your name. Vivi pressed the record button on her phone, hands trembling slightly. Her reflection in the screen showed a stranger. Sunburned, hair matted with salt and sand, designer leggings torn and stained beyond recognition. The girl who'd spent hours perfecting her golden hour glow was gone. She swallowed hard, tasting salt. Tears carved clean tracks down her dirty cheeks, washing away the facade she'd maintained for her millions of followers. I don't want to die alone. The words hung in the air, raw and honest in a way her perfectly filtered confessionals had never been. No filters, no retakes, no carefully curated backdrop or practiced vulnerability. Just the truth she'd been running from since the crash. He died alone. Her voice shook as she looked at the pilot, his uniform rippling in the breeze. I was too busy taking selfies to even notice when we started going down. Too busy planning how I'd caption the emergency landing. Too wrapped up in my own story to see his ending. Vivi wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing dirt across her face. The gesture was unconscious, artless, everything her old self would have edited out. I don't want to die like this, just a body on a beach. The confession felt like glass in her throat. She stopped the recording, the weight of her words settling over her like the morning mist. With gentle movements, she began covering the pilot with sand, giving him what peace she could. Each handful was an apology, a prayer, a promise to do better. Chapter 7. The Monster Mashup. The wild boar's snort pierced the night, echoing through the dense jungle canopy. Vivi jolted awake in her makeshift shelter of palm fronds and plain debris she had modeled together over the last couple of days, her heart hammering against her ribs as she listened. She reached for her phone. The beast's dark shape loomed at the entrance, massive and bristling with coarse hair. Its tusks gleamed like curved daggers in the moonlight as it pawed the ground, leaving deep furrows in the earth. Steam rose from its snout in the cool night air. No, fuck you. Not you again. Vivi scrambled backward, her designer leggings catching on jagged metal as the boar charged with terrifying speed. Its bulk smashed through her shelter, sending fragments of metal and leaves flying in every direction. The structure she'd spent so much energy building, her only sanctuary on the island, collapsed around her in a cacophony of splintering wood and tearing fabric. Her hand closed around her selfie stick, the expensive carbon fiber one she'd used for all her beach vacation shoots. She propped her phone in the mount with shaking fingers and hit record. The boar wheeled around for another charge, its beady eyes distracted by the phone's light. Vivi rose to her feet, selfie stick extended like a spear. "You picked the wrong influencer!" Her voice cracked as she swung the stick. The metal connected with the boar's snout. It squealed and reared back. Vivi danced away from its slashing tusks, keeping the camera trained on the action. The boar lunged again. She jumped aside. "I survived a plane crash!" She jabbed the stick at the boar's face. "I ate raw shellfish." Another swing caught it in the ear. "I buried a dead pilot." The boar backed up, shaking its massive head. Vivi advanced, selfie stick raised. "I'm trending, bitch!" She brought the stick down hard across its snout with a sickening crack that echoed through the trees. The boar squealed and turned tail, its massive bulk crashing through the underbrush as it fled into the darkness, leaving a trampled trail in its wake. Vivi stood trembling in the wreckage of her shelter, chest heaving as adrenaline coursed through her veins. Broken branches and torn leaves littered the ground where the boar had charged through her makeshift home. Her phone had captured everything. The fight, her screams, the boar's retreat, in perfect high definition. Her hands shook as she rewatched the footage, the blue light illuminating her dirt-streaked face and wild eyes, casting harsh shadows that made her look almost feral in the darkness. Vivi's fingers flew across the cracked screen, instinct guiding her movements as she added filters and hashtags to the video. The jungle's darkness pressed in around her, but her focus remained fixed on crafting the perfect caption. Wild versus wildlife. Savage mode. Survivor life. Island girl. No filter. Raw content. She positioned herself against a fallen log, angling the phone to catch the moonlight on her face. The battery indicator blinked red, 2% remaining. Come on, come on. Her thumb hovered over the upload button. The progress bar crept forward, agonizingly slow in the spotty signal. 15%, 23%, 10 predichet? The screen went black. No! She jabbed the power button. The phone sputtered to life for a moment, showing the failed upload notification before dying completely. Vivi scrambled for her power bank. It was dead. The phone was dead. She slumped against the log, clutching the dead phone to her chest. The victory over the boar meant nothing if she couldn't share it. No likes, no comments, no validation. Just darkness and the sound of distant waves. What's the point of being brave if nobody sees it? Her whisper disappeared into the jungle's chorus of night sounds. The phone's blank screen reflected her face, streaked with dirt, hair matted with leaves, eyes hollow in the darkness. Today, Little Miss Perfect, Vivi Cruz, looked nothing like her profile picture. Chapter 8. Unfollow. Vivi trudged down to the beach, her feet dragging trails in the sand. The dead phone weighed heavy in her pocket, useless metal and glass that had once been her lifeline to millions of followers. She pulled it out and stared at the black screen, remembering all the perfect moments she'd captured. Sunsets in Bali, cocktails in Santorini, that viral dance video in Paris. The cracked screen caught the morning light, reflecting fragments like a broken mirror. Her reflection splintered into 1,000 pieces, each one showing a different version of the person she used to be. This is stupid. She dropped to her knees in the sand, her fingers dug into the beach, scooping out handful after handful until she had a small hole. The waves crashed nearby, a steady rhythm that matched her breathing. The phone slipped from her grip into the makeshift grave. Sand cascaded over its sleek surface, covering the designer case she'd bought in Milan. More handfuls followed, burying years of carefully curated posts and perfectly edited photos. Goodbye. She patted down another layer, fingers trembling slightly. Goodbye, golden hour glow. More sand cascaded through her fingers. Goodbye, Facetune. The hole filled steadily, each handful of gritty particles erasing another piece of her digital life. Goodbye, filters. The last handful covered the phone completely, leaving nothing but a smooth glob of sand. Vivi sat back on her heels, staring at the small mound that now held years of carefully crafted perfection. A broken piece of pink coral lay nearby, its jagged edge catching the morning light. She grabbed it and scratched a crude epitaph in the sand, each letter wobbling as she carved, "Here lies my social media life, no likes required." The morning breeze swept across the beach, warm and persistent, already starting to smooth away the edges of her message like time itself, washing away memories. Vivi stood, brushing sand from her knees, watching as the tiny grains sparkled as they fell. Without the weight of the phone, her pocket felt strangely light, almost hollow. Her shoulders relaxed, years of tension she hadn't realized she'd been carrying melting away like morning mist over the ocean. Vivi's stomach growled as she walked along the beach's edge. Her fingers traced the hollow space beneath her ribs, a stark reminder of how long it had been since her last proper meal. The few coconuts she'd found that had been edible barely taken the edge off her hunger. The beetles, the urchins, the crab was the best. A flash of movement caught her eye. She crouched down, watching as another black beetle scuttled across a piece of driftwood. This was a big one. Her nose wrinkled at first, but then she heard insects were pure protein. The beetle froze as her shadow fell across it. In one quick motion, she snatched it up. The creature squirmed between her fingers, its hard shell smooth against her skin. "No one's watching." Vivi lifted the beetle closer to her face, examining its iridescent shell. "Who cares?" She popped it into her mouth before she could change her mind, squeezing her eyes shut as if that would somehow make it taste better. Her teeth crunched through the shell with a satisfying crack, and a squirt of earthy flavor filled her mouth, coating her tongue with an unexpected richness. It wasn't terrible. This one tasted like bitter nuts with a hint of soil, reminiscent of the expensive mushrooms she'd once sampled at a food influencer event in Los Angeles. She swallowed quickly, surprised at how easy it had been this time, and found herself unconsciously licking her lips to catch any remaining taste. Another beetle emerged from beneath the driftwood, its shell gleaming like polished onyx in the morning sun. Vivi's stomach rumbled again, and this time she didn't hesitate. Her fingers darted out, pinching the insect between thumb and forefinger. "Breakfast for champions." She held it up, examining how the light played across its carapace. "5-star dining, island style." The beetle's legs tickled her palm as it tried to escape. A giggle bubbled up from her chest, catching her off guard. The sound was foreign, unfamiliar. When was the last time she'd laughed without calculating how it would look on camera? The giggle grew into a full-throated laugh as she watched the beetle's futile attempts at freedom. "Sorry, little guy, but I've got to eat." Her shoulders shook with genuine mirth, tears forming at the corners of her eyes. If my followers could see me now. The thought of her perfectly manicured Instagram feed featuring Island Survival Cuisine Bug Edition sent her into another fit of laughter. She doubled over, clutching her stomach, the beetle still squirming in her grip. The sound echoed across the empty beach, raw and real and completely unfiltered. "Bottoms up," she tossed the beetle into her mouth, still chuckling as she crunched down. This time she savored the earthy flavor, letting it roll across her tongue. The shell cracked between her teeth with a satisfying crunch, and she found herself nodding in appreciation. Tears streamed down her face. This time, she didn't care how she looked or who wouldn't be watching. The laughter felt cleansing, washing away layers of constructed perfection like waves erasing footprints on a sandy beach. Chapter 9. The Uninfluenced. Vivi dragged another palm trunk across the sand, her muscles burning from the effort. The collection of logs she'd gathered over the past days lay arranged in a rough rectangle near the water's edge. Her hands now bore calluses and cuts from stripping bark and testing wood for rot. The Louis Vuitton bag sat propped in the sand nearby, filled with strips of vine she'd collected from the jungle. The designer logo was barely visible now beneath a layer of dirt and scratches. She'd discovered the vines were stronger when soaked in seawater, making them more pliable for binding the logs together. "Who knew you'd make such a good bucket?" She patted the bag's scuffed surface as she dumped another load of seawater over her gathered vines. The sun beat down as she worked, weaving the soaked vines between the logs. Her fingers moved with growing confidence, each knot tighter than the last. The technique had taken days to master, but now the pattern came naturally. Over, under, pull tight, repeat. She'd positioned 3 sturdy logs as the spine of her raft, lashing smaller pieces crosswise to create a stable platform. The design wasn't pretty, nothing like the sleek yachts she'd posed on for sponsored content, but it was solid. Each knot she tied felt like a small victory, another step toward survival. The cooler bag proved invaluable as she worked, ferrying seawater back and forth to keep the vines from drying out. Its gold hardware glinted in the sun as she made another trip to the water's edge, a far cry from its original purpose of chilling champagne for beachside photo shoots. $5,000 for a water bucket, Vivi muttered as she poured another load over her work. Best investment I ever made. She tested each joint of the raft with her full weight, checking for any give in the structure, shifting from one foot to the other. The vines held firm, their wet fibers beginning to shrink and tighten as they dried in the sun, creating an even stronger bond than she'd hoped for. The raft wasn't beautiful, but it was strong. Like she was becoming, each day on this island, stripping away another layer of her carefully curated persona to reveal something far more resilient underneath. The memory washed over Vivi as she worked on the raft, herself at 10 years old, dragging branches through the small patch of woods behind their Miami apartment complex. The summer heat had pressed down just as heavily then, but she hadn't cared. Vivi, be careful with those thorns, her mother had called from their second-floor window, taking a break between nursing shifts. Young Vivi had waved back, her hands already scratched and dirty from collecting fallen palm fronds and broken branches. She'd discovered a hidden spot between 3 trees where the undergrowth formed a natural wall. The space had become her sanctuary, away from the cramped apartment and her mother's worried eyes. She'd spent hours weaving smaller branches between the larger ones, creating walls that kept the outside world at bay. No phone, no followers, no trends, no metrics to track, just the quiet rustle of leaves and the satisfaction of building something with her own hands. Look what I made, Mom! She'd bounced with excitement when Maria came to inspect her handiwork after her shift. Her mother had ducked through the child-sized entrance, her nurse's scrub still on. It's beautiful, mi amor. She'd run her hand along the woven walls, testing their strength. You've always been good at making something from nothing. The fort had become their special place. On rare evenings when Maria wasn't working, they'd sit inside with a blanket and a thermos of hot chocolate, sharing stories and dreams. Sometimes they'd spot fireflies through the gaps in the walls, their lights blinking like nature's own Instagram notifications. We don't need much to be happy, Maria had said one night, holding Vivi close. Just each other and a little imagination. The fort had lasted 3 months before a hurricane tore it apart. Vivi remembered standing in the rain, watching her creation collapse, feeling the sting of loss for that time. But the knowledge had stayed with her, the memory of how to weave, how to build, how to create shelter from whatever materials life provided. Vivi stepped back from her nearly completed raft, wiping sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across her work. She'd positioned the Louis Vuitton bag at the center, lashing it securely to serve as storage for any supplies she might find. A glint caught her eye from the sand, the pilot's watch she'd recovered while burying him. She picked it up, brushing off grains of sand from its scratched face. It still worked. Her fingers traced the worn leather band before securing it around her wrist. The weight felt strange after weeks without accessories, but somehow right. Not like the delicate bangles and charm bracelets she'd collected for photo shoots. This was functional, necessary. Time to get back to work, she mumbled, returning to the raft. She tested another section of vine lashing, tugging hard to ensure it would hold. The knots had become second nature now, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. Each pull and twist brought her closer to potential rescue, or at least the chance to find help beyond this stretch of beach. The tide was coming in, water lapping at the edges of her work. Soon, she'd need to drag the entire structure higher up the beach to keep it from floating away prematurely. The thought of moving it alone made her muscles ache, but she'd grown stronger during her time here. Tasks that would have seemed impossible weeks ago now felt merely challenging. A crab scuttled past her feet, reminding her of hunger. She'd learned to catch them now, another skill born of necessity rather than choice. But food would have to wait. The raft demanded her full attention while the daylight lasted. Chapter 10, Signal Storm. Dawn arrived and Vivi dragged her raft toward the waterline. The incoming tide helped, each wave lifting the structure slightly, making it easier to move across the wet sand. She secured the Louis Vuitton bag one final time, checking that the vines held tight. Inside, she'd packed what little she had, some coconut shells for water, strips of dried seaweed, and a collection of beetles wrapped in large leaves. The pilot's watch on her wrist read 6:47 a.m. The waves grew stronger as the sun climbed higher. Vivi positioned herself at the back of the raft, bare feet planted firmly in the sand. Her arms, now tanned and muscled from weeks of survival, gripped the makeshift handholds she'd woven from palm fibers. "Vale la pena intentarlo," she whispered her mother's words, "worth trying." The phrase echoed in Maria's voice, from all those times she'd encouraged Vivi to take chances, to push beyond her comfort zone. A larger wave rolled in. Vivi pushed with all her strength, feeling the raft lift and slide forward. The water reached her knees, then her thighs. Another wave came, and she used its momentum to guide the raft past the breaking point. The ocean pulled at her clothes, the same designer outfit she'd worn on the plane, now salt-stained and torn. She kept pushing until the water reached her chest, then began to swim alongside the raft, testing how it rode the swells. Her creation bobbed steadily, the careful engineering of her palm trunk foundation keeping it level. The Louis Vuitton bag remained dry in its elevated position, lashed securely to the center platform. Vivi took a deep breath and pulled herself onto the raft. Water streamed from her clothes as she found her balance on the woven surface. The shore already looked different from this perspective. Smaller, more distant. She could see the full curve of the beach where she'd spent weeks surviving, the wreckage of the Lux jet glinting in the morning sun. The storm struck without warning. One moment Vivi floated on calm seas, the next a wall of black clouds swallowed the horizon. The waves grew, lifting her makeshift raft high before dropping it into deep troughs. Lightning split the sky. Thunder cracked overhead. Rain pelted her face as she gripped the lashed logs. A massive wave crashed over her, the force tearing at her grip. Salt water burned her eyes, filled her nose. The raft twisted, vines snapped one by one, the sound lost in the howling wind. A surge lifted the craft and slammed it down. The impact splintered the logs apart, sending Vivi tumbling into the churning sea. Water closed over her. The current yanked her down, spinning her until she lost all sense of direction. Her lungs screamed for air. She kicked hard, fighting toward what she hoped was the surface. Her head broke through. She gasped, sucking in half air, half spray. Another wave rolled her under. She surfaced and spotted a piece of her ruined raft bobbing nearby. She lunged for it, her fingers closing around the rough bark. The log rolled as she tried to climb on. She settled for draping her arms over it instead, letting it keep her head above water. Each wave threatened to tear away her grip. Her shoulders burned from the strain of holding on. "Please," she choked out between waves. Not like this. Not alone in the middle of the ocean where no one would ever find her. The designer bag floated past, its gold hardware catching a flash of lightning before disappearing into the darkness. The storm raged on. Vivi clung to her piece of log, feeling smaller and more insignificant with each passing moment. No cameras captured this struggle. No filters could soften the reality of her situation. Just her, the wreckage of her raft, and the vast angry sea. A mountain of water rose before her, blocking out the light. Vivi's eyes widened as the wave towered overhead, a dark wall ready to crush her. No! The water struck with the force of a truck. The log ripped from her grasp. The wave dragged her down, flipping her over and over. Her elbow slammed into something hard. Pain shot through her arm. She tumbled through the darkness, lungs burning. Which way was up? Her fingers brushed something solid part of the raft. She grabbed for it, but the current yanked it away. The pressure in her chest built. Her body screamed for air. She kicked wildly, fighting against the pull of the water. Her head broke the surface. She sucked in a desperate breath before another wave crashed over her. "I don't want to die." The words tore from her throat as she surfaced again. Salt water streamed down her face, mixing with tears she couldn't hold back. The storm swallowed her scream. Something hard smacked against her ribs. She grabbed it, a splintered piece of log. Her numb fingers dug into the bark as waves battered her body. Each breath came in ragged gasps between mouthfuls of sea spray. The current yanked at her legs, trying to pull her under. She wrapped her arms tighter around the debris, pressing her cheek against the rough wood. The log rolled with each wave, but she held on. Her shoulders cramped. Her muscles shook from exhaustion. Another massive swell lifted her high into the crest. For a moment, she hung suspended at its peak. Then gravity took hold. The wave crashed down, driving her deep beneath the surface. But her fingers remained locked around the log, her one lifeline in the chaos. She broke through again, coughing and sputtering. The wind whipped her hair across her face. Lightning flashed, illuminating walls of water on all sides. The debris shifted beneath her grip, threatening to slip away. "Please," she sobbed, her voice raw. Her nails dug deeper into the wood. "Please." Chapter 11. Rescue. But not really. A distant thrum pierced the morning silence. Vivi's muscles screamed as she lifted her head, scanning the horizon. The sound grew louder, the unmistakable whop-whop of helicopter blades cutting through air. "Here!" Her voice came out as a hoarse whisper. Vivi rolled off the log, her waterlogged clothes heavy as lead. The pilot's watch on her wrist showed 6:47 a.m. through its cracked face. The helicopter's silhouette emerged from behind a bank of clouds, its searchlight sweeping the coastline. Vivi stumbled to her feet, arms raised overhead. Her shoulders burned with the effort. "Please see me," she mouthed, too exhausted to shout. The sound grew deafening as the helicopter approached, whipping her salt-stiffened hair around her face. The wind from the rotors whipped the sea into a frenzy. A figure dropped from the helicopter, suspended by a cable. The rescuer was followed by another with a gurney. "I've got you!" Strong arms wrapped around her waist. Vivi collapsed into his arms. The rescue team worked with practiced efficiency, strapping Vivi onto the bright orange gurney. Her body felt like lead, each movement sending ripples of exhaustion through her limbs. The metal frame swayed as they secured the final buckle across her chest. The cable tensed. The beach dropped away beneath her as she rose through the salt-laden air. The helicopter's rotors created a deafening wall of sound, drowning out everything else. Wind buffeted the gurney, sending it spinning in lazy circles as she ascended. Through salt-crusted eyelashes, Vivi watched the coastline shrink below, a curved slice of white sand against endless blue. The Louis Vuitton bag was down there somewhere, along with the remains of her raft and her old life. The gurney reached the helicopter's open door. Multiple hands grabbed the frame, pulling her inside the metal cabin. The surface beneath her changed from air to solid steel. Vivi's muscles gave out completely as she slumped onto the helicopter's floor. Her body shook uncontrollably, whether from cold or relief or both, she couldn't tell. Someone draped a rough wool blanket over her shoulders. The scratchy fabric felt like heaven against her sun-scorched skin. The pilot's watch pressed cold against her wrist, a final reminder of what she was leaving behind. Hours later, she sat on the deck of a rescue boat, staring into a puddle of rainwater. The face that looked back stunned her. Raw, red skin peeled across her nose and cheeks. Salt had dried her hair into twisted ropes. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. But those eyes, they held something new. The panic was gone, replaced by a steady calm. No hint remained of the carefully curated mask she'd worn for so long. The storm had stripped away more than just her makeup. She touched her reflection, rippling the water. For the first time in years, she recognized herself. Vivi traced her fingers over the pilot's watch on her wrist. The tide pool flashed through her mind, that moment when she'd knelt in the sand and dug a shallow grave for her phone. The ocean breeze lifted her tangled hair as she leaned against the ship's railing. Below, waves crashed against the hull, their rhythm so different from the desperate roar of the storm. Her thoughts drifted back to that tide pool, where she'd watched the water creep in. The incoming tide had washed over her buried phone, erasing her final message beneath layers of sand and salt. The memory struck her with force. She'd spent years measuring her worth in likes and follows, crafting the perfect shots, chasing validation through a screen. But the ocean hadn't cared about her follower count. The storm hadn't checked her engagement metrics. "Coffee?" A crew member approached with a steaming cup. Vivi wrapped her hands around the warm mug, remembering how she used to stage her morning coffee shots. The perfect marble counter, the artful foam design, the carefully positioned MacBook in the background. She'd taken 30 pictures before getting it right. Her mother's voice echoed in her head. "You don't have to be perfect, Vivi. Just be you." The tide pool had become her turning point. As she'd watched the water claim her phone, something inside her had shifted. It felt like watching a star burn out, terrifying at first, then strangely peaceful. The constant pressure to perform, to please, to prove herself worthy of attention, all of it had washed away with that rising tide. The end.